So I'll begin, yeah. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, although I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed and fully self-awakened one. Yeah, I was just glancing there, make sure my microphone's on. Okay, very good. So this evening, I'm going to tackle this discourse, number 20. It's called The Removal of Distracting Thoughts. Now, this is very specific. The Buddha's up in Anathapindika's Park again, Jetta's Grove. And he tells us in the first line what this discourse is about. When a bhikkhu, remember bhikkhu means all meditators, is pursuing the higher mind, from time to time, he should give attention to 5 signs. What are the 5? So this discourse is really for people who are wanting to attain jhana, the absorptions. But there's a lot here which we'll do for vipassana practice too. So keeping that in mind, yeah. So now when you're practicing, concentration, obviously you want to stay on the object. So it's always, generally speaking, good practice to begin with the breath in vipassana and just to wait for that settlement, for the mind to become fairly still. What my teacher used to say, Sadhu Janaka, somewhat steady, right? Somewhat steady. We never knew exactly what that meant, but you get the idea of it. And often when we go to sit, of course, there's something quite loud waiting for us, some anger, some anxiety, some overexcitement or something. But sometimes when we sit, there isn't much there. And if we don't watch it, the energy of the meditation rises. And before you know it, you're off into fantasy land. So it's good to start with a little bit of concentration meditation on the breath. Yeah, just watch, just get the feel of it, watching it, feeling it rising and falling. Okay. So now giving attention to some sign and owing to that sign that arise in evil, unwholesome thoughts. Now, in the jhana, you would have something to center on. So the breath, sometimes a circle of color, sometimes metta practice. So you always have something that you're going to develop your concentration on. To make it easy for us, we'll just stay with the breath. There are 40 of those objects, by the way, but we'll, just to simplify things, we'll just stay with the breath. So he's watching the breath, you're watching the breath, and there arise unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hatred and delusion. So you should give some attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. So in other words, displace your attention somewhere else. So this, there's a long note on it at the back from the commentaries. And it says, hold on, I've got the right number. 240, here we are. So thoughts of sensual desire arise directed towards living being. The other sign is foulness, right? So any desire that you have towards a human being, if you see the foulness of that human being, that undermines such desire. But when it's the thoughts directed to things, inanimate objects, then to see their impermanence. So if, for instance, you're sitting there and you suddenly think about your next mobile phone that you want to buy, then just recognize that, in fact, mobile phones arise and pass away. Not worth spending too much time on it. When thoughts of hate arise, directed towards living being, then the other sign, of course, is metta. And when it's designed to other objects, like a hated noise or something, then just go towards the elements. What's the actual basic feeling? So it might be that you're annoyed with some noise coming from next door or something. And then if you go to the ear and just feel what you're actually experiencing. That takes away the hatred. Now, when it's thoughts with delusion, it says to live under a teacher, study the Dharma, inquiring into its meaning, listening to the Dharma, and inquiring into its causes. So the problem with delusion is, of course, the person doesn't know they're deluded. It can be a bit of a problem. So that's the first remedy. If when you're trying to still the mind, there's a lot of agitation there, just give it the opposite of what is making you agitated. So take, for instance, there's a lot of anxiety and your mind goes off onto this worry, this constant worry. So you can counteract the underlying mood by bringing to mind peaceful memories, memories of being in the country, memories of being in a park, etc. Okay. It'll work so far. It'll work so far. So, and as always, he always gives a metaphor for us to make it understandable. With abandoning of them, this mind becomes steadied, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. Just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove, and extract a coarse peg by means of a finer one. Okay, so there you've got a nice little image. So that's the first remedy, you might say. The second one, while paying attention to some sign, to some object in the breath, what is unwholesome, there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hatred and delusion. So now, if they come again, as it were, then one should examine the danger. These thoughts are unwholesome, they are reprehensible, they result in suffering. And when he examines the danger in these thoughts, then any unwholesome thoughts, of course, should fade away, or at least be undermined. And here we have a lovely example. Just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his or her neck. So that's recognizing that if you think about the consequences of unwholesome thoughts, then of course they're not so attractive and one wants to get rid of them. Then while examining the danger in these thoughts, there still arise in him evil thoughts. So if that doesn't work, then he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. So in other words, just taking your mind away from it and come back to the breath. Just keep coming back to the breath. Just make no effort to be there. And again, he gives us an example. Just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms, in other words, to see what they were looking at, had come within the range of sight, would either shut his eyes or look away. So that seems a little bit more easy, actually, than the others, but that comes as number 3. That's the third one. So obviously, if you're trying to settle on the breath and the mind keeps wandering off on some angry thought, some irritation you've had, then just to, as it were, push it to the side. Now, there's a distinction here between suppressing something, which you would do with anger or fear, and parking it, right? Just putting it to the side, saying, I'll deal with it later, okay? And that can be a very skillful way, especially in ordinary daily life, when you're at work or something, or you're on a bus, or you're on the tube, and some obsessive thought keeps coming, that just to come in, feel what the cause of that obsessive suffering is, the emotional state, and just talk to it and say, no, look, I'm just going to put you to the side. You stay there. I'm going to park you, and I'm just going to pay attention to the rise and falling of the breath. And you just keep doing that. Just keep gently putting it to the side. That's not the same as suppressing or out of fear or anger, because that's negative energy that you're piling on top of the already negative energy, the turbulence. Okay. So while trying to forget those thoughts, and of course that's a there's a bit of an impossibility there, because of course every time you try to forget something, you remind yourself of what it is you're trying to forget, and therefore unwittingly reinforce it. So don't try to forget anything, just put it to the side. Perhaps forget's not the right translation. And then still, thoughts come and invade the mind. Then they should give stilling to the thought formation of the thoughts. Now, what the commentary says is that this means you inquire. I don't quite know how they make that out from that statement, but that's what they say. See, stopping the cause of the thought, this is accomplished by inquiring when an unwholesome thought has arisen. What's its cause? What is the cause of its cause, right? So here, of course, in Vipassana, we would go to the heart and feel the emotion, the mood, the mental state that's actually driving this pattern of thought, you see. And you'd stay there and wait for it to pass away, right? Just some planning, constantly planning about something you've got to do. And when you come off that and come down into the body, into the heart center, and you feel the agitation, the excitement, so you just stay with that. So this is the cause, and just let it slowly die away. The example he gives is, just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And he would walk slowly. Then he would consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? And he would stand. And then he would consider, why am I standing? What if I sit? And he would sit. And then he would consider, why am I sitting? And what if I lie down? And he would lie down. By doing so, he would substitute the grosser posture for the subtler posture. So you're constantly inquiring as to what is the cause of this of these obsessive thoughts, right? Distracting thoughts. It's put here. The title of the discourse is The Removal of Distracting Thoughts. But I think often our thoughts are quite obsessive, not only just distracting. Okay, so that fails. So now they're still arising in unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hatred, with delusion. Then, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed up against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. Sounds terribly violent, doesn't it? Sounds terribly violent. Teeth clenched, tongue pressed up against the roof of the mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. The example he gives is of a strong man seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him. So with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, a meditator beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind. So what would that mean by in practice, you see? Well, basically that's mantra, right? And of course it's not quite as violent as the language gives us. I think what the Buddha is trying to give us through this seemingly violent language is the real commitment, to stop the mind from wandering. And mantra is one way of doing that. So the mantra of, say, may all beings be happy. You'll know the Tibetan one, Om Mani Padme Hum. But there's any little phrase which for you has some meaning, and one keeps repeating it with attentiveness, repeating it and repeating it. And as the mind becomes concentrated, then of course all the hindrances are slowly suppressed, right? They're not healed, they're not cured. They're slowly suppressed. And of course, then the heart begins to sing with it a certain type of beauty, a certain type of feeling, which is elated and beautiful, caused by concentrating the mind. So that's one purpose of mantra. So remember, this discourse is about achieving jhana. So now, as Vipassana meditators, you might use mantra just to bring that sense of calmness, especially may all beings be happy, may they be, free of hatred, what is it? May you be safe, well and happy. May you live contented in harmony with the world. May you be safe, well and happy. And just by generally just going through that, you see. Some of you will know the Christian Jesus prayer. I can't remember it now, but you'll find that sort of mantra in all religious forms, and it has this benefit of making the heart grow. But remember, it doesn't do anything with the hindrances, with the defilements that are in the heart. That's what the Buddha discovered, and that's what, of course, is the purpose. Should we say it's not the purpose; it's the consequence of doing vipassana. Purpose of vipassana is to see the three characteristics: impermanence, cause of suffering, not self. But as we do that, of course, the heart is purified. That's the magic of the system. So then, of course, he repeats these five ways of overcoming obsessive or thought. So he gives attention to some other sign. He examines the danger of the thoughts. He tries to forget those thoughts and not give attention to them. He pays attention to the stilling, to thought formation, stilling of the thought, which is the inquiry. And then finally, teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind. You see, it's become a little obsessive for me, that phrase. So then the bhikkhu is called a master of the courses of thought. He will think whatever thoughts he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. In other words, he's now in control of his mind, of his thought mind, of his imagery. He has severed the craving, flung off the fetters, and with complete penetration of conceit, has brought an end to suffering. So in this sense, this also leads to liberation by way of undermining those thoughts. But remember, that's not the whole story, okay? But eventually, the purpose of our practice, or the consequence of our practice, is, of course, that you have complete control over your mind. You don't think the thoughts you don't want to think, and you only think the thoughts that you want to think. Now, when the Blessed One said this, the bhikkhus, those who there, were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So don't forget this little book. I think it's probably back to front, is it? Pressing Out Pure Honey by Sharda Rajel. And you can download it as a PDF. I don't think it's printed anymore, actually. There's not a printed copy. But then, of course, it's not needed. I'll try and put that on the website. And what it does is it just, like here, on that particular discourse, just a nice little notes for you to read, keep in mind, you see. So it's like you could read this before, read the discourse and come back to this, and that would give you the understanding. So that is the discourse on how to overcome distracting or obsessive thinking. I can only hope this will be of use to you, and that it will not drive you to despair, and that you will, by your practice, attain full liberation from all suffering sooner rather than later. So we can do a little bit of practice. Was that, I hope? Seems okay, good. I keep forgetting to look at the screen.